All right, welcome everybody. Hey, we're going to do things a little bit different today. I'm Wayne Dean. I'm the owner of 3D Sales Training. I've developed a specific training program. And typically, when I do these, I'm usually using a PowerPoint presentation and trying to do some graphics. But I thought we'd go old school today. So today's session is three questions that you can use and when to use them, all right, to close more sales. So I've got a couple different devices in my hand here, so give me a little bit of time as I go through this. And a lot of people ask me, why 3D? Why is the name of my company 3D Sales Training? Well, because I believe and I know by fact, our brains are wired to accept patterns of three. Patterns of three is the lowest number that our brain can comprehend and still get enough information to make decisions, gather information. But patterns of three is what we are used to. And as a matter of fact, if you think about it, our brain, if you looked at my brain from the top down or your brain from the top down, you notice that there's three parts of brain. The first part of our brain that developed was the reptilian part of the brain for uh, flight or survival. And then we developed the next part of our brain, the limbic brain, where we started developing emotions. All right. And then the last part of our brain, the third part of our brain, is the neocortex, which is Latin for new bark, which is where we develop language to explain our emotions, to justify our flight or fight kind of theories or rationale. So the brain itself is broken into patterns of three. But if you think about patterns of three throughout childhood, three blind mice, um, three amigos, do, re, mi. If you think about it, we have been conditioned to accept three bears, hot, cold, just right. Throughout our entire life, we have been conditioned to accept patterns of three. So anything that I do in my training usually around patterns of three because the mind can't handle too many different options and patterns. Remember, we had Maslow's theory was we all need someone to love, something to do, and something to hope for. Even pyramid power, some people believe that the pyramid, the three-sided pyramid, created some kind of mystical powers for longevity, health, well-being. So again, our entire life, patterns of three have been conditioned into our brain. So that's why when I do a sales training program, I try and not give people more than three different concepts to think about because our success is based on three principles: how we feel, or some people say your attitude, the actions, or some people say our behaviors, and then the skills we have, either in sales or whatever skills we have to go through life. So if you think about it, if you have the right feelings, all right, the right actions, and the right skills, you'll be successful. But I always like to stress and say, I've seen people wearing these lapel pins that say attitude, or people that go listen to a Zig Ziglar rah rah motivational speaker. I'm not a motivational speaker. I like motivational speaking. It seldom changes long-term behavior. Sometimes you go to some of these sessions or you listen to a video and it lasts about as long as it takes you to get back to your car in the parking lot. So I believe, though, that the most important thing is, do we have the right behaviors and the right skills? So I teach the skills part of that. I think of a triangle again. Do you have the right feelings, attitude? Do you have the right actions, behaviors? And do you have the right skills? You can't always control your feelings or your attitude. I mean, you might wake up this morning and say, I'm going to have a positive attitude. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to be positive. But on the way to work, somebody cuts you off in traffic, gives you a finger. Now, what's your attitude like? You can't always control your attitude because of outside influences, but you can always control your behaviors. I bet there's some people here right now that you do something. If you're in a bad mood, you go take a walk, you listen to music, you do a behavior that influences your feelings. So if you think about it, if you've got the right attitude based on the behaviors you do, you combine that with the right techniques, you'll be successful. So again, that's a pattern of three that you need to think about. All right, so selling is really easy. Get the appointment, make the presentation, close the sale. But a lot of people say to me, that's the hard part, Wayne, is closing the sale. How do I close? So that's what we're going to talk about mostly today, is how to go about closing. Hopefully you've got enough appointments. You're already doing a lot of things already. Sure that So those of you just joining us, we just did about the reason of patterns of three in our behaviors, why we do things in patterns of three. So today I'm going to talk about three things. Again, I'm going old school today. I'm not putting up a PowerPoint presentation. Matter of fact, if you go to some of my my Facebook group, in which my Facebook group is question-led selling. So you can just go to my Facebook community or group. And I post some videos of last week's training that I did with the PowerPoint and the slick stuff. But today we're going a little bit old school as far as just talking about really what the buyer steps are, what buyers do to us, what traditional selling is and why is failing nowadays. And then my step system today. And I put in here 3 times when you're going to ask questions. And I hope this visualization helps those people who are visual understand when and how to ask certain questions along the way. So let me kind of step over here and kind of let's talk about the buyer steps. Buyers have a system. Now, regardless of whether you admit it or not as a buyer, you have a systematic approach to deal with salespeople. The first thing that buyers do is they kind of mislead about their true intentions. And they're not bad people. We have a saying, you can still go to heaven and lie to a salesperson. It's not that necessarily the buyers are lying to salespeople, but they're playing their cards close to the vest because they think they lose leverage if they told the salesperson, well, here's my problem, here's my budget, if you can fix my problem, price you can afford, we have a deal. Well, they feel they lose leverage then if they give up too much of their problem or challenges. So prospects are a little standoffish at the beginning because they don't want to give up too much information. What they're trying to do is they want to steal information from the salesperson. They want to know what you as a salesperson know, and they want to be able to, what's the word I'm looking for? They want to be able to steal your free consulting. Okay? Excuse me for 1 second. Change something here. Okay, so here's what happens. First thing that a buyer does is they mislead about their true intentions, they steal your information, and then they run home and hide. Okay. Now, again, don't get mad at them. They're not bad people. It is just a systematic approach to get what they want without having to give up anything. They want to be an educated consumer, and that's what they're trying to do. Traditional selling is pitch. Matter of fact, anybody ever heard of that phrase, the dog and pony show? The dog and pony show, actually, that phrase was coined by Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, 3M, in the late 60s. Because in the 60s and early 70s, if one wanted to go through any type of formalized sales training, the only companies that really focused on selling and having a systematic approach was IBM, Xerox, and 3M. But what they came up with the pitch, the dog and pony show, benefits and features. Let me give you the feature of my company and then try and convince you why it's a benefit. And then what happens is if you try and push somebody to why they should buy your product or service, now you got to deal with stalls and objections. Okay. And so most people think that's what sales training is about. How can I overcome objections? Well, here's the secret. Wouldn't it be great if there weren't any? If you're running a system that is to the benefit of you and the prospect, you really don't run into stalls and objections because you have a conversation, not an interrogation, about what the client might need. But then salespeople, after they pitch and handle stalls and objections, they're taught to close. And there's 7 different closes. There's the puppy dog close, the you owe me close, the alternative close, the special offer close. There's all these different closes that buyers have become jaded to. And so salespeople have been taught, don't take no for an answer. No's not an option. Push, push, push. Well, no is an option, quite frankly. So when you think about this systematic approach here, they pitch, prospects misleading. They're handling stalls and objections. You're trying to make sure they don't steal all your free consulting. They're running home and hiding, and you've been trying to close and chase them. No wonder most of us don't want our own kids to grow up into being salespeople because it becomes kind of a tug and war kind of situation. Excuse me, 1 more second here. All right. So let's talk about this again as far as my system, and then I'll get to the questions and the reason why you're online here with me. So my system is STEP. And I want you to remember that acronym, STEP. And the first three steps are the most important. The first three. Size up the situation is what the S stands for. Who is this person? How does this person process information? Are they visual, auditory, kinesthetic? In the DISC profile, are they the D, an I, an S, or a C? How can I best present my information to the client so that we can talk about how that they would receive it? Now remember, there are three types of people as far as how we process information. 55% of the world is visual. Visual people need to see your stuff. Visual people are getting a good cue right now by seeing something that I'm doing. Then you have auditory people. Auditory people need to hear what you have to say. They process information verbally. And then kinesthetic people, it's a feeling. You know, if you ever had anybody said, I can't put my finger on it, it was a gut decision. Those are kinesthetic people that their limbic part of their brain is the most active. And sometimes the neocortex part where language is developed can't explain why they made a decision. But that's okay. That's how people process information. I'm visual. I'm a visual person. I talk fast. Visual people use their arms. We say things like, do you see what I'm talking about? Did you get it? So you want to understand the style of the person you're dealing with. You know, in the 20 some years I've been a sales trainer, nobody's ever argued with this statement. People tend to buy from people they like and they trust, and people tend to like and trust people like themselves. If that statement is true, which I tell you it is, how much time do you or any salespeople you know spend really getting better, sharpening their axe at bonding rapport skills? So size up the situation. Now here's the first question. When you're first meeting with somebody, here's what helped you close. I told you this session's on 3 sessions. First question. Hey, are you going to be okay as soon as you decide you wouldn't buy from me? Are you going to be okay telling me that? Early in the process, when you show somebody where the exit ramp is, when you give them permission to say no, it changes the dynamics of the meeting. Because remember, they think you're in this mode of the traditional sales where you're not going to take no for an answer. The client says no 6 times before they say yes, push, push, push. Early in the process, are you going to be okay telling me no if at any point during this conversation we decide there's not a fit? Most people will say, yeah, I'm okay with that, but they won't tell you no because they haven't sold your stuff. We're using their own system against them because they want to still get free consulting. So when you say, are you going to be okay telling me no? Oh, yeah, I'm sure I will, but I'm not going to tell you no because they want to steal your stuff. Then you reverse it and say, and are you okay if I tell you no? Are you okay if I determine there's not a fit? I mean, if this is purely a price-driven transaction that you're looking for the lowest price, probably not a fit. Because I want to think about another triangle, 3-side triangle. In any business model, price, quality, service. Those are the 3 things you offer. Either price, low price, good quality, good service. You cannot offer all 3. There is no business model where you can be successful, be at the lowest price, the best quality, best service. You'll probably be out of business in 6 months. So I bet your business model, those of you who are watching right now, is we offer a quality product, all right, good service at an affordable price. But we were never designed to be the cheapest. And that's why you get rid of it right now. If this is purely a price-driven transaction, I might tell you no. That's question number 1 that I want you to work on. Let me get a drink here for a second, folks. All right. So, all right. Again, 3D. Think of everything in 3. Don't give a prospect more than 3 options at a time. Our mind cannot process it. Can you really remember a 12-step program? Can you really remember the 7 habits of highly successful people for Stephen Covey? Can you remember the 5 steps in Dale Carnegie, the 7 steps in the Sandler system? Most people can remember those if they're broken down into 3 periods of 3. So that's what I talk about. S, size up the situation. T, take them to their problem. Now, we use the word sometimes pain internally. We don't use it with a client. But people are motivated to action by the intensity of their pain. If it hurts really bad, you'll go get something taken care of. If it doesn't hurt, you'll live with the problem. It's not that big of a deal. Your job is to ask questions to get the client to discover that they have a problem and you're uniquely positioned to fix. And that's what we spend a lot of time in my question-led selling program, is teaching you how and when to ask specific questions to get a client to realize and discover they have pain. We don't cause pain. We just ask questions to get the client to realize that they have pain. Second thing is, now we want to do is we want to extend that pain in the future. Hey, let's pretend it's a year from now. Describe for me what your life is like if you did decide today to go with me, or even if you decided not to and you decided to live with the problem. When you take somebody to the future, it's an amazing psychological thing that happens to us. We start to describe how we feel that this salesperson could help us because we're actually picturing ourselves into the future. So size up the situation. Who is this person? Does this person have enough pain to deal with you? Okay, extend that pain in the future. And now after you found this out where you're ready to go and do your presentation, that's what P stands for, is now your presentation. Here's the second question. My first one is, are you going to be able to tell me no? Second question is, hey, based on what we talked about down here, I'm about ready to show you how I think my product or service can solve your problem at a price you can afford. I'm just curious, before we get to that point, let's pretend that my presentation is everything you want at a price you can afford. I'm just curious, what would happen next? Right here on that step, right before presentation, is the second question. Hey, let's pretend this is what you want. I'm just curious what would happen next. What that does, it weeds out any stalls, objections you might have. The last thing we want to do is wait until after we pitch and then say, so what do you want to do? That puts a lot of pressure on you and the client. Now the client might come up with some objections and you've already pitched your product or service. Maybe now it's too late. Now the only option you have is to discount. So let's have a conversation right here before your pitch on the steps, all right? As to, hey, I'm just curious, let's pretend I'm able to solve all the problems you have here at a price you can afford. I'm just curious what would happen next. So that you'll get like, well, I got to talk it over with wife. I got to bring my business partner in. Great. Sounds like that person should be here when I make the presentation. And it gives you the option or the ability to maneuver your presentation to when it's the most succinct and optimal for you as the salesperson. Okay. So here's the next step now. Now you pitch. Now you present only to the 3 pains they gave you down here, 3 problems. Do not pitch to more than 3 problems that the person brought you. Even if there's an additional problem that they have that we haven't talked about, don't put it in the presentation. Because clients don't buy your product or service. They buy solutions to their problems. And if you haven't discussed what the real problem is and you add it up here, oh, by the way, we also have this. You know, a lot of people call it upselling, where you've got a product or service that you know the client would benefit from. And so you put it into your package, hoping to add to your presentation that it gives it enhanced value. But I want you to think about that value proposition stool, thing with 3-legged stool. What's the product and what does it do? Okay. What problem does that product solve for the client? And then the third leg of that is, how would the client evaluate your product or service against the competition? That's the 3-legged value proposition. What does the product do? What problem does the product solve for the client? And how would the client evaluate that? So again, we're staying in this pattern of 3. That's where you have the conversation in here. Now here's the last question. All right. Never say to the prospect, so what do you want to do? Because that gives them the opportunity to say, well, I'd like to think it over. I'm going to run home and hide. Here's the magic dust. I've shown you how my product or service solves your problem at a price you can afford. I'm just curious, all right, what would you like me to do next? That's the close. What would you like me to do next? Put it on you as the prospect. And if you've done a good job in here identifying problems that you can solve, when you do your presentation, what you're going to find is the client's going to say, I don't know, do I have to write your check? Do I have to put a down payment down? Those are real good buying signals when they tell you what you need to do next to close this sale. Do I need to put a down payment down? Yeah, that would make sense. Why? What were you thinking? And let the prospect, I was thinking, I don't know, 10%. You might have been only offering 5. And they're offering 10. So we get the client to say it is what the issue is. So let me review again for you the questions. It's okay to tell me no. Are you going to be comfortable telling me no? I'm about ready to show you how I can solve your problem at a price you can afford. I'm just curious what would happen next. Now that I've shown you how my product or service can solve your problem at a price you can afford, What would you like me to do next? Those three questions will increase your closing ratio because you've set it up instead of pitching, handling stalls, objections, and then pressuring the client into a close. And in a way, we're using what's called the assumptive close. The assumptive close is if they tell you what their problems are, they tell you how bad they are, and they don't want to negate doing them or solving them. They want you to help them solve them. And you can do that if you can solve the problem of pricing forward. Why wouldn't there be a sale? If you follow a systematic approach to an end result, you'll have success. And that's why you want to follow a system. And again, I hope you join me and join our system. But if you don't, at least get one. And don't do benefits and features selling. Benefits and features, again, it's, here's the feature of my company. We've been in business since 1972. Okay, but why is that a benefit to the customer that you've been in business since 1972? Well, you're assuming that, boy, that gives you credibility. You have longevity in here. You don't know that the client might sit there and think when you say, well, my feature is we've been in business since 1972. Well, then you probably don't know anything new. Well, you're still operating under the old ways of doing things in the 70s. So you can't really necessarily put a benefit in there without the client saying it's a benefit to them. All right. We were taught, by the way, to read from right to left. And so that's why most people do the feature of my company. Here's the benefit. What I want you to do is start with a question. Suppose I said, we've been in business for almost 50 years. I don't suppose that would be a benefit to you. And let the prospect say, yeah, I'm looking for somebody that this isn't their first rodeo. I'm looking for somebody that's got experience. I've dealt with somebody before that on the surface was a lower price, but they didn't have any experience. And so it ended up costing me more money in the long run. Now they said it, not you. Remember, prospects believe only half of what a salesman tells them, but 100% of what they say. So make sure that you're doing a lot of questions. And then the other 3D thing, I'm going to end with this. We do questions in stroke, repeat, reverse for clarity. Stroke, that's a great question. Glad you asked. That makes sense. I appreciate that question. Whatever it is, acknowledge that the client had a good question. Stroke, it's part of what we call nurturing parent. The nurturing parent is, hey, that makes sense. I've heard that question before. I'm just curious. Why did you ask it? So stroke, repeat, so that there's no mutual mystification. Repeat, hey, I think I heard you said you were interested in the warranty. And then reverse, stroke, repeat, reverse. I'm surprised you asked about our warranty. I thought you'd probably ask us for some recommendations. Well, that would be good too. Well, then, what's more important, the recommendations or warranty? Now, the client said it, not you. So patterns of 3 is what I want you to think about. And when I do my training, and every Wednesday at 11 o'clock, the clients that participate in my sales club, whatever curriculum we teach, it's all about information of 3, so that we don't overwhelm you and that you leave my meeting thinking, oh God, what was that 7th step? What was the 8th step? It's just in patterns of 3 that you are conditioned to accept. So again, ask these 3 questions, but when you ask them is the most important. It's okay to tell me no. Are you going to be able to tell me no? I'm just curious. Let's pretend you love everything I'm about ready to present. Close before you present. Then you pitch and solve their problem or price forward, and finish with, what would you like me to do next? If you follow that system, I think you'll find that it takes a lot of pressure off you and the client, because now you're not sitting there, I don't want to ask them questions because they might say no. So what do you want three dozen of those, or you want 36? How many would you like? Do you want that delivered on Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday evening? Those are the kind of things that people just are so used to salespeople trying that they bristle at. All right, so that's my systematic approach. Next steps. If you're interested in hearing more, having a conversation, I'm not saying getting married to me, but would you like to have a conversation about what I do? Just email me at Wayne at 3, the number 3, D, salestraining.com. Wayne at 3D salestraining.com. And we'll schedule some time together. I'll send you back my calendar link. We can have a conversation, 15, 20 minutes, about your unique needs, what's unique to you, and if my system fits your style or not, or if you even have any interest in learning a systematic approach to selling. So again, Remember that sell is not a four-letter word. It's not a bad thing to go out and sell. My definition of sales is just influencing people to a mutually beneficial decision, one that helps them and leaves them in better condition than when you met them, and one that helps you and your company go to the bank. What more noble profession could there be? All right, appreciate it. Anybody got any questions before I'm going to turn off the recorder, but I'll stay open online here if anybody's got any questions.